Hey guys, it's Julien, and today, super excited to be talking to you about how I made my new track, Control Me, which just dropped on Kraftek. I have seriously been waiting for this one for a minute. Really excited to be on the label and everything, like, just really great. And today I'm going to be talking to you guys about how I made the track. We're going to be going through everything, and I've also got the full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that on my Bandcamp right at the top of the description. That also really helps support me, so definitely go check that out. And yeah, let's dive in. Alright, so here's the project. We're at 128 BPM, and one thing you'll notice here right off the bat is a really simple track. There's like very few things going on, all things considered here. There's like really not even that much percussion. Like, it's a very simple track, but what it does is I think it communicates that one idea really well. So this is something I talk about a lot. I talked about this with my last track on Respect, Dark Nights. But yeah, like, you know, if you have a really good idea, all you really need is to just let that idea shine. And you're not going to have to do all this extra stuff of like 50 layers of percussion and like perfectly compressing it all and like all that, because it's like, it's not really about that. It's not about like having all those background percussion layers and like, you know, little like tiny things. It's just about having a really good idea, letting that shine, and you know, that's going to do the work. And the thing is, when you approach really any creativity this way, like, this is not just music at all. This could be filmmaking, this could be like photography, this could be literally any type of art you can think of. When you approach it from a place of like, okay, I'm gonna just have a really cool idea that can immediately be communicated to you, and we're gonna let that shine, rather than approaching it from, okay, let's make a mediocre idea, but we're gonna put a bunch of cool stuff in the background to make it exciting. You know, when you approach it from the way of just making something cool off the start and kind of letting that shine without a bunch of extra fluff, ultimately, you're going to make better stuff, because your ideas are going to stand on themselves rather than having an idea and now it has to try to stand on all this other stuff. It's like, don't do that. Just make something cool right off the bat. So that's the idea behind this track, is really just trying to like hone in on that process of track making and just like, again, like focusing on one really solid idea rather than, oh, let's just make an okay idea and then use a bunch of different layers of percussion to make it exciting. You know, those tracks never really do that well. But the first thing that we have up here is the kick groove. So the way this kick is made, I'll actually go into detail with this one, where you can see, so we have our punch layer, which is obviously just like the main kick that you hear. These are just two of my kicks layered together. So that one, and then that one, you can see we're doing the EQ3 thing here, where you have like one just doing the mids and highs and one doing the lows, and then you get like, it's a really good way to make your own kicks, because you can take two kick samples. You're still saving all the data that's there. We're not like, you know, getting rid of some stuff with EQ or saturating and making it messy or compressing. It's nothing like that. We just have two really good kicks that sound good. Like this one in particular, I really liked the low end. This one, I really like the mids and highs. And then you're just kind of letting those play side by side, the mids and highs from one with the lows from another, and it just creates the kick that way. So yeah, I try to think of it like that, rather than like trying to layer stuff and then use like a bunch of compression and all that kind of stuff. Don't worry about that. You can see I even had some saturation here that I ended up getting rid of, and I also had some other layers that I was playing with for the kick too, as you guys can see. But yeah, and then underneath that we have this like, so all this is, it's this kick just playing 16th notes, and then I have it being distorted, and it's going through this like bandpass here that I made with EQ. So this is really just for the intro and the outro. If you notice, it just plays through this whole intro part where there's no like real lead synth yet, and then I guess here also while the lead synth's playing, but it's just kind of like fading out there, and then it plays in the end here. So this is something to keep in mind. This is really good for the groove. You're not having that, but then once you get to this part, like, you're not even gonna hear it if I put it in there. And even if you can hear it, it's kind of taking away from that main lead. So it's kind of just like, you know, keeping in mind not having that get in the way of everything else. And then just having it for the parts where you can really notice it. And the last layer to the kick here is this ghost kick bass, which sounds like this. So this is being made with the same technique that I'm showing you guys a lot on this channel, actually, where we do like a like it's 16th notes, but every other one is a bit louder. So you get this nice kind of groove. that and yeah, and then what's happening here is, so it's a kick doing 16th notes. And then what's happening is we're low passing it to get just the low end, and I'm also notching it. So without that, and with it just made it a bit deeper, cutting out some of those low mid-range frequencies. We really wanted this to just be like in the sub. And then I actually have a bit of drum bus on there to make it a bit fatter. And I've also got some boom on there, which really helps with that. Here's without it. And then with it, so you can hear why we do this. This is a case, like, a lot of times when you use drum bus and you turn it off and then turn your sound up, you might notice that it's kind of like the same thing. Like, a lot of times drum bus is doing just like a volume boost, I've noticed. But in this case, it actually does give it that like fullness that you're just not going to get without it. And then we have a compressor, side chaining this to the main kick, and this EQ here, which is just doing like a bit of a cut, and then boosting the low end. And that's really more for sound design. It might look a bit crazy, and like, yeah, if you were working with a sound that right off the bat was, like, if you sampled a sound from a track and then tried to do this, I would say maybe that would be too much. But in this case, you know, it's just for sound design to bring that low end out a bit more. And yeah, and then on the group there, we just have a bit of compression to sidechain the kick, like all the layers of the kick together. And I know I was saying no compression, but here it's actually good because it just kind of helps to even these out. You'll notice it's not much at all, though. There's without it, and then with it. So you can hear it's just really helping to like pull that low end up and get it on an even level with the main kick. And then we have these filters here, which is automated to different times. So like this one comes on throughout the track. Then we have this one, which is just like filtering up at some of those points as well. A lot of times when I'm making a track, you know, it's like it's late night in the studio, you're tired, you're not really paying attention. Sometimes you just kind of end up grabbing 2 high pass filters. And it's cool because, you know, ultimately it's about what makes a track that works and not about like, oh yeah, like I went in and optimized my high pass filter automation. Because like, it doesn't really matter. What really matters is if you could just make something that sounds really good. And then the last thing on here is just a low pass filter, which you notice is in the intro. Kind of makes it disappear a little bit. And then it's also going into that break there. So we're filtering up and down at the same time, which is a good way to make that kick disappear. And yeah, then after that, we have this little percussion loop I made. So the way that I made this is it's 2 layers. So we have the like, which is just like some kind of Foley sound that you can see I chopped up and I played with the fades. So that's kind of giving us like that sizzle. And then this one, you can see also that one's just going through some drum bus, a lot of a high pass filter, and then even a little bit of a low pass. And then for the second layer, it's one of these loops here that we've just taken and we're high passing it and low passing it. And there's also a little bit of LFO on each of those, so just getting a little bit of movement. But yeah, this just creates that nice kind of like groove, because if you just have like your hi-hats and your kick, I mean, that can be a bit flat. Like obviously this style of track is going to be very simple, not too much happening, but if you really just have like, you know, that is very, very empty. But if we go here and add on these like kind of nice percussions, you can hear it's just going to fill that out really nicely and allow you to still be very minimal with what's in the track, but, you know, it's still working really well. And yeah, then we just have a bit of drum bus on the group there with those, and a low pass filter, which you can see brings it in and out. And there's also a high pass filter, and then I have an auto pan on there to make it bounce off of the kick. Which without that, you can hear it's a lot more in your face. So then we just have our hi-hats, which are pretty straightforward. You can see just like a nice fat hi-hat. And then one underneath it doing 16th notes. And just this ride, which you can see I've done that like echo trick to make it a bit more stereo. And there's some saturator on there. And then on the group of those, we have a little bit of saturation. Not too much, but a little bit is going to go a long way to just make it sound fatter. We have a high pass filter. And then I also have this washout here, which is just kind of like making these disappear there. And just a high pass filter with some reverb. And then finally just the low pass filter, which is actually just on there, but it's not doing anything. Again, sometimes late night you're working on a track, you leave stuff on there, and you forget about it. And then after that, we have the main lead. So for this sound, what we're doing here, you can hear it's literally just that same lead line over and over. So it's actually a pretty simple melody, because if you look at this, you'll see, okay, so we go G, up to G, an octave up. Like, it's really only 4 notes here. We're just using G, G sharp, D, and then D sharp. So that's really it. And if you look at this like from the perspective of just like a basic minor scale, it's actually very simple, because we're literally just using like the root note, the minor third, and the fifth, which if we were going to make a G minor chord, that would be the only notes you would need. So it's actually a very simple, and then there's also the 6 on there, but like, yeah, we're just kind of playing with that. But then it's really like what you can do with those notes, you know, like the way we have like, you notice like when that gets to the peak there, when you get that dun-na-na, dun-na-na, there's a call and response happening because those notes are so close. And even here, like the way we use this minor third, up until that point we hadn't even used it. So just throwing that in there. You know, it's almost like that one. It's like this is kind of a dark sounding melody. But then that's actually a major chord happening right there. Like that would technically be the same first 2 notes from an A sharp major chord. So by doing that, we're giving kind of like a happy thing at the end. So it's like dark, dark, and then there's a little light at the end of the tunnel. Now for the sound on this one, I'm using the Arturia Mini Moog. Shout out to Arturia for sending this one over. Really solid synth here, and it's really good for making like just super fat leads like this. So you can see here's the synth patch. Essentially what it is it's actually just 2 oscillators, because we have, you can see all 3 of these are on, actually all 4 because we have the noise oscillator on as well, but we're not using oscillator 2. So it's a saw wave and then this pulse wave here, which are just an octave apart, and then we just have a bit of noise, like I said. There's not even any detuning or anything like that. And then you can see we're also automating like the filter cutoff. We're automating a lot of things, but yeah, we're automating the cutoff. So it's kind of different there. And then in terms of effects in the synth, yeah, I'm not even using any of the onboard effects. So just getting this nice sound out of the Mini Moog. And then after that we have, well, first this utility here, which is just kind of for bringing the gain down a little bit so that it's not going to hit the saturation as hard. Then we have a bit of echo and some reverb. You can see I've got Valhalla room for that. You know, really solid reverb for this style of stuff. And then I have a bit of saturation. You can see, so that's making it a lot fatter. Here's without it. And then with it, you know, just kind of like really gives that fullness to the sound. I have this auto pan to make it sound like it's being sidechained to the cake. There's also this high pass filter, which just comes on for the parts where there's the cake, essentially. So like here when we have the kick playing, here when we have the kick playing, and then in the break, there's no high pass because you want to let that low end through. But if you have it off still when the kick comes back, you can see they'll clash versus. That just cleans it up. Then we have this washout, same one I showed you before. And then finally just another low pass filter, which is just for this whole transition in the break. You know, it makes it kind of go away, so you can hear the vocal. And then on the groove there's also just a little bit of some EQ8 here, just boosting the highs. And then the last step that I have on here, and just make it a bit fatter, is I'm actually using this pre-1973, which is also from Arturia. If you guys don't have this, it's very similar to like a saturator or drum bus or something like that. But I'm just using this aggressive bass preset, and then I tweaked it a bunch. But this just really fattens the synth up. Here's without it. And then with it. So it's just that last little push to really like fill the sound out. And yeah, then we have this clap here. You'll notice this break is a very simple, like it's not got a whole like sweep, it's not got like a snare or anything. It's literally just a clap that plays on the upbeats, and then it's just like fading in. A little bit of echo, some drum bus, and then that utility coming up, and that's all it needs. Then we have the vocal sample.
Control me.
So that actually came from this.
You can't control me. You can't control me.
And then I just took the control me. I pitched it down a bunch.
Control me.
And then you can see it's going through a bit of OTT here, some echo and reverb, a bit of drum bus as well, which really helps. Like with vocal samples, drum bus is actually pretty good because it's going to make them a lot fatter. And they're not really going to get that same like crunchy thing you would get if you just tried to put like a distortion on it. But yeah, with the drum bus, then I just got this X click on here, which is actually not really necessary. If you don't have that plugin, I just have it on there. You can see it's not really doing much. But yeah, and then I just have a high pass filter to make sure that this isn't going to have too much lowing, because that's something you got to watch out with the drum bus on vocals. And then I also have a low pass filter, which is just bringing it in at the start there, and also bringing it out a bit in the outro. And then we have this synth, this main pad. So this is just playing a G minor chord, again, just the basic notes that you saw from the lead line, and it just plays, in the background here. You can see there's lots of automation on this, which we'll talk about in a moment. But first, I'll show you the synth patch. It's this analog lab pad. Once it loads up, there we are. Yeah, so it's from, I believe this is the Selena. Yeah, so it's like that classic kind of like, 70s, 80s style, like almost like an organ, but a bit more synthy, almost kind of like something you'd hear in like a Tame Impala track or something like that. But I've just got that going through, actually, just a bit of auto pan here to make it bounce off of the kick. I have a high pass filter. We have this low pass, which obviously that's really the main thing with the sound. It's like something like this is playing the same chord for a long period of time, so you really just want to let it kind of go up and down throughout the whole track. And that's really what's going to create tension with this layer. And you'll notice it's all about like saving sort of like the biggest moment for the right moment. Like how we have here. Yeah, this is a pretty like energetic part of the track. Things are picking up, but we're not going to just take it up to there. We're going to still keep it down here. So then finally when you get to this point and it's all the way up, then you really feel that, it's just like kind of like knowing what you have in terms of tension and then saving that for like the proper moment. And then I have this washout, which is literally just for that one part. And then that's it for that synth pad. Then we have this sound. So this is just one of those nice like atmosphere kind of like brass sounds you hear in a lot of techno tracks now. What it is it's 2 layers. So it's this, which you can hear is kind of the mid-range, but it doesn't really have that like that you need. So the brass gives you like that, like the kind of growl. But yeah, so that's something you want to keep in mind. You don't want to just have the like, but you also don't want to just have the like. You need to have both, and you need to be able to like hear sounds and like know, okay, this one is gonna layer really well with this one because they're doing 2 completely different things. So essentially, it's like you're complementing both sounds rather than taking away from them. And yeah, the effects on those are pretty much the same, you can see. And then on the group there, we just have a low pass filter, which just brings it in and out. Then we have this crash, which is just being reversed there, which is actually the only actual like effect sound in this track. So that's something to keep in mind here. Yeah, this is like one of my simplest tracks, and with the least effects, the least like effort put into that kind of stuff. But that's the one that ended up doing pretty well. But then the last sound that we have down here is this like main driving synth. And so this is just meant to sit underneath that lead. You'll notice it's doing that same kind of movement where we're doing from D sharp down to D. And then it's moving at the same time as the lead. Like when the lead plays that D sharp, this is playing the D sharp, the lead plays the D, this is playing the D. So that's something that you gotta keep in mind. If you're gonna have two parts like this playing at the same time, totally cool, but you gotta make sure that they really line up like that, especially if it's as melodic as this is. So it's just kind of doing these eighth notes. And then the root note is just G. So we're just doing G, and then the sixth, and the fifth. And the sound on this one is just a serum patch that I made. You can see it says unison saw wave going into a low pass filter, which is being automated. And we also have an envelope on that filter. And then I have a phaser and some chorus on it. And you'll notice the phaser, we actually have the rate down. So we're not using it like for that like kind of like warping like phaser sound. It's just for like essentially like a filter to kind of just give it a bit of a different vibe. And shape the sound of it. And then that's just going through a bit of echo, some drum bus, an auto pan to make it sound like it's being sidechained to the kick, a high pass filter which is automated as well, like, well actually we're not using it, I think that was for that part that I ended up getting rid of. And then I just have a bit of washout, which literally just comes in that one part. And yeah, so that is going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Let me know if you guys want to see me do more breakdowns on my tracks. Like I said, this is a super simple track, you know, but I wanted to show you guys that, like, a lot of times the simple tracks are the ones that do well. Like, a lot of times it really is just the fact that, like, okay, you play a really complicated track for somebody, and you play a really simple track for somebody. The really complicated one, as cool as it might be to them, they're ultimately going to get kind of lost in it. But if you play the really simple one for them, you're giving them like enough time and enough space ultimately to kind of like get into that space. It's like, would you rather people just kind of observe your track or feel like they're part of it, you know? And I think when you have a simple track, it's a lot easier to feel like you're part of it because you can just wrap your head. It's less information for your brain to take in, you know? It's literally less data that your brain is trying to process. So ultimately you have more space to, for one, decide if you actually like the track, and two, you know, really like get into it. And these are the tracks that people really connect with, I feel like. So I wanted to show that with this video, that even if it's a simple track, it can still be complex and still have, you know, enough stuff going on to where it will work in that way, but it's also going to be a really cool and exciting track. So yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Like I said in the beginning, you can get this full project file, samples, the MIDI, the presets, literally everything from this track. So if you've ever wanted to have, you know, a full track that released on one of these really big professional labels like this, and just be able to have the full project file and the samples, everything that was used to get in that position in the first place, so that you can learn from it yourself and hopefully make your own tracks to get released on these big labels. The link to this is at the top of the description. It's just $10, and on top of this, it really helps keep me going as well. You know, I don't make a whole lot just off of the YouTube videos, but with these samples and project files and ghost productions and all this kind of stuff, I'm able to keep going and keep bringing you guys new videos. And yeah, so thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.